Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. My name is Brian, and I was 35 when I found out my marriage had been a lie. I had been married to Karen for 7 years. We lived in a small coastal town where everybody seemed to know everybody, and from the outside, our life looked normal. We had a 4-year-old son named Caleb. I had never questioned that he was mine. I took him fishing on Saturday mornings. I built him a little wooden bench in the garage because he liked watching me work. Every night, I was the one who read him a story before bed. Then, Karen started coming home late. At first, I didn't make anything of it. Then, it became 3 or 4 nights a week. One Thursday, she walked through the door at almost 10. "Long day?" I asked. She dropped her purse on the counter. "Yeah, I'm exhausted." "Where were you?" She looked at me for half a second too long. "Work." I nodded. "Okay." She went upstairs. I didn't follow her. Instead, I started paying attention. The next week, she told me she had a late meeting near the office. So that evening after she left, I waited 2 minutes and followed her. She didn't go to work. She drove 15 minutes north and parked outside a seafood restaurant overlooking the water. I watched her walk inside. 5 minutes later, a man joined her. I knew him. His name was Derek Lawson. He worked at the gym Karen had joined 6 months earlier. I sat in my truck for almost 20 minutes. Then I walked inside. They were sitting in a booth near the window. Karen was holding his hand. She saw me before I reached the table. Her face went completely white. Derek turned around. I looked at both of them. "Get up, Karen." She stood slowly. "Brian, I can explain." "I know you can." I looked at Derek. "And you're going to explain too." Neither of them spoke. Then Derek said quietly, "She told me you two were basically finished." I looked back at my wife. That was the first moment I realized this wasn't just an affair. There was another lie underneath it, and I was about to find out exactly how deep it went. Karen stared at Derek like she was trying to decide which lie to tell first. I pulled out the chair across from them and sat down. "Start talking." "Brian, please, not here. You had no problem coming here." She lowered her voice. "I made a mistake." I looked at Derek. "How long?" He shifted in his seat. "About 6 months." Karen closed her eyes. I laughed once, but there was nothing funny about it. 6 months. "Brian, no, you don't get to interrupt me now." I looked at Karen. "You told me you were working late." I was scared. "Scared of what?" She didn't answer. Derek finally spoke. "She told me your marriage was already over." I turned toward him. "When did she tell you that?" "Months ago." Karen immediately shook her head. "That's not what I said." Derek looked at her. "You said you were only staying until you figured out how to leave." I looked back at Karen. "So you were planning to leave me?" I didn't know what I wanted. "But you knew what you wanted from him." She had no answer. I stood. "Karen, we're going home." She followed me outside. The drive back was silent. Caleb was already asleep when we got home. I checked on him before going upstairs. He was lying sideways across his bed, one foot hanging off the mattress. I pulled the blanket over him. Then I walked into our bedroom and shut the door. Karen stood near the window. "I'll end it," she said. "It's already ended." Her face tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm filing for divorce." She stared at me. "You can't just throw 7 years away." "You threw them away." "I made one mistake." "No." I stepped closer. "You made hundreds of decisions. Every message, every meeting, every time you came home and lied to my face." She started crying. I didn't move. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my head since the restaurant. "Karen, when did you first sleep with him?" She wiped her face. 6 months ago." I watched her carefully. "Are you sure?" She looked confused. "Yes." I nodded. "All right." I walked away from her. "Brian, where are you going?" "I need some time to think." I left the house that night and stayed at a hotel. The next morning, I called a lawyer and told him what had happened. Then I made another call. I ordered a private paternity test. I didn't tell Karen. I didn't know if there was anything to find, but after everything I'd learned, I wasn't willing to take her word for anything anymore. The test took 8 days. During those 8 days, Karen tried everything. She apologized. She promised to quit her job. She said Derek meant nothing. She even suggested marriage counseling. I refused all of it. On the 8th morning, I received the email while sitting in my truck outside my lawyer's office. I opened it. The result was clear. I was not Caleb's biological father. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down. I didn't feel confused. I didn't need another test. I didn't need someone to explain what the words meant. I walked into the office and handed the results to my lawyer, Gregory Bennett. He read them quietly. "I'm sorry, Brian. I need to know what happens next." He looked at me. "That depends on the legal circumstances. You've raised the boy since birth, so we need to handle this carefully." "I understand." "And Brian?" "Yeah? Don't make any decisions involving Caleb while you're angry." I looked at him. "I'm angry at Karen, not the kid." That afternoon, I went home. Karen was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. She looked up. "Where have you been?" I put an envelope on the table. "I got something you need to see." She looked at it but didn't touch it. "What is that?" "The paternity test." Her face changed immediately. "You did that?" "Yes." "Brian, Open it." She slowly picked up the envelope. She read the first line. Then she stopped. Her hands started shaking. I watched her face. "Say it." She looked at me, tears filling her eyes. "You're not his father." I nodded. "I know." She lowered the paper. "Brian, I didn't know." "Don't lie again." "I wasn't sure." I stared at her. "When did you find out there was a chance?" She stayed silent. "Karen." Her voice finally broke. "Before Caleb was born." My jaw tightened. "You knew?" "I knew there was a possibility. And you still let me sign the birth certificate." She started crying. "I was terrified." "No, you were protecting yourself." She shook her head. "I loved you. Then you should have trusted me with the truth." She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "Who could be the father?" She stared at the floor. "I don't know." I looked at her for several seconds. "You don't know?" She finally looked up. "There was someone else." "Someone else?" She nodded slowly. "Before Derek." "How many?" She looked away. "Brian, it wasn't like that." "How many?" "One." I waited. "His name?" She hesitated. "Samuel Price." I had never heard the name. "Where did you know him from?" "An old job." I took a breath. "So you cheated with Samuel before Derek?" "Yes." "And you don't know which one is Caleb's father?" "I thought it was you." I stared at her. "You thought?" She wiped her face. "I got pregnant around that time. I didn't know exactly. And you decided not to tell me. I was scared you'd leave." "You were right." She looked up. "I made a terrible mistake." "No, you made a choice." I walked toward the kitchen counter and picked up my keys. Karen stood. "Where are you going?" "To get the rest of the truth." She stepped in front of me. "Brian, please." I stopped. "Move. I'm begging you. You've had 7 years to tell me the truth. I'm not spending another night listening to half of it." She moved aside. I grabbed my keys and left. I didn't go back to the house that night. I stayed at a hotel and called Gregory Bennett first thing the next morning. I told him everything that had happened. He listened quietly. When I finished, he said, "If you're serious about the divorce, don't start confronting people yourself." "I'm serious." "Then let me handle the legal side. And if you want to know more about Samuel, hire someone to find him." "Do you know anyone?" "I know an investigator. His name was Thomas Reeves. I met him that afternoon and gave him everything I knew about Samuel. The old job, the approximate time Karen had been involved with him, and the fact that he could have been Caleb's biological father." Thomas took notes. "What exactly do you want?" he asked. "I want to know who he is, where he is, and whether Karen ever told him about the pregnancy." He nodded. "I'll see what I can find." 3 days later, Thomas called. "I found Samuel Price." I sat up. "Where is he?" "About 40 minutes from here. He works for a construction company." "Did you find anything about Karen?" "I found enough to confirm they knew each other around the time you're talking about. They were involved for a short period." I was quiet. "Does Samuel know about Caleb?" "That's the part I couldn't confirm." "Then I want to meet him." Thomas paused. "I already spoke with him." That caught me off guard. "What did he say?" "He knows who you are." I tightened my grip on the phone. "How?" "Karen contacted him recently." I stood. "What did she tell him?" "I don't know. I only asked him if he'd be willing to meet you." "And he agreed?" "Yes." "When?" "The day after tomorrow. I'll send you the location." "Good." I ended the call. That afternoon, Karen called. I answered. "Brian, where are you?" "Not coming home." "Can we please talk?" "We've talked. I mean really talk." "About what?" She started crying. I can fix this. No, Karen, you can't. I'll stop seeing Derek. You're still thinking this is about Derek. She went silent. It's about everything you hid from me. I was afraid. You were protecting yourself. That's not fair. Neither was raising a child while you knew there was a chance he wasn't mine. She didn't answer. Then she said something that caught my attention. Samuel doesn't know about Caleb. I sat forward. You told me you weren't sure who the father was. I wasn't. But you knew there was a possibility. Yes. And you still said nothing. She started crying again. I ended the call. Now I had one thing left to settle. I needed to hear the truth from Samuel himself. That evening, Gregory called. I've reviewed everything. We can file. Do it. There may be legal questions involving Caleb because you've raised him since birth. I understand. You should think carefully about what relationship you want with him going forward. I looked at a photograph on my phone. Caleb was sitting on my shoulders at the beach, laughing while I tried to keep him from falling. I won't punish him for what Karen did. Gregory was quiet for a moment. That's the right way to look at it. I hung up. The next morning, I filed for divorce. I didn't warn Karen first. She found out when the papers were served. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. You actually filed? Yes. You didn't even tell me. I already told you the marriage was over. You can't do this to our family. You did that when you decided to cheat. She started crying. What about Caleb? I'm thinking about him. Then come home. No. Brian, please. We can work through this. You don't get to decide that anymore. She went quiet. Then she said, You still love me. That doesn't erase what you did. She hung up. That evening, my sister Melissa called. Mom told me about the divorce. I figured. You're angry. I understand that. But you need to think about Caleb. I have? Then why are you doing this? Because Karen lied to me for years. She made a mistake. No, she made a choice. Melissa sighed. You're going to hurt that boy. Karen created this situation. I'm dealing with it. You're his father. I was his father because I believed he was my son. She took the truth away from me. She went quiet. Then she said, Mom thinks you're being selfish. I know. She wants you to stay. I won't. After we hung up, I put my phone down. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going back. I met Samuel the next afternoon at a coffee shop near the harbor. He was around my age, dressed plainly, and looked uncomfortable the moment he saw me. You're Brian. Yes. He stood and offered his hand. I didn't take it. Sit down. He did. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Samuel said, I didn't know you were still married. I was. He looked down. Karen told me your marriage was finished. I stared at him. She told you that? Yes. When? He looked down. About 5 years ago. The timing hit me immediately. 5 years? He nodded. Karen told me she was pregnant shortly after we stopped seeing each other. I stared at him. Did she tell you the baby might be yours? Yes. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. What did you do? I asked her if she wanted me involved. And? She told me no. She said her husband was happy, and she wanted to keep her family together. I looked at him. Did you believe her? At the time, yes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. I still have the messages. He showed me the conversation. Karen had told him she was pregnant. Samuel had asked whether the child could be his. Karen had answered that she wasn't sure and that she wanted to move forward with her husband. Then she stopped responding. I read the messages twice. Did you ever ask about the child again? No, I thought you knew. I didn't. Samuel looked genuinely ashamed. I'm sorry. I finally shook his hand. You're not the one who lied to me for 7 years. He nodded. Before I left, he asked, Are you going to have another test? Yes. I'll take one. That was exactly what I wanted. 2 weeks later, the second test confirmed what the first had suggested. Samuel was Caleb's biological father. I gave the results to Gregory. Then I went home and packed the last of my things from the house. Karen stood in the hallway. So, it's him. Yes. She started crying. I carried the final box to the door. You made your choices, Karen. She whispered. What happens now? I looked at her. Now the truth does. The divorce took another few months. There were meetings, paperwork, and conversations I never imagined I'd have at 35. Karen initially fought almost everything. She wanted the house. She wanted financial support. and she wanted me to keep acting like Caleb was my son, even though the truth had finally come out. I didn't fight her over every dollar. I wanted out, not revenge. Gregory handled the negotiations, and eventually we reached an agreement. The house was sold. The money was divided. As for Caleb, things were more complicated. I refused to disappear from his life without thinking about what that would do to him. He was 4 years old. None of this was his fault. I told Gregory, I won't punish a child for something his mother did. We worked out a temporary arrangement that allowed me to remain involved while Samuel began establishing his own relationship with Caleb. It wasn't easy. The first time I saw Samuel and Caleb together, I stood across the park and watched them talk. Caleb looked happy. That was enough for me. Karen eventually approached me. "You could still come back," she said quietly. I looked at her. "No, I know I ruined everything." "You did," she swallowed. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, I just don't want anything from you anymore." She looked down. "I really did love you." "I believe you." She looked surprised. "Then why can't you forgive me?" "Because forgiveness doesn't mean I have to stay married to you." She had nothing to say to that. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Karen stayed in the same town, but she and Samuel never became a couple. They kept things focused on Caleb instead of pretending there was still something between them. Samuel didn't suddenly become some perfect replacement for me. He had missed 4 years of his son's life, and there was no way to erase that overnight. But he started showing up. He went to Caleb's school events. He took him to the park. He learned what foods he liked and which bedtime story he always wanted to hear. I kept my distance at first. Then one afternoon, Caleb asked me a question. "Are you still my dad?" I looked at him for a long moment. "I'm still Brian," I said, "and I'll always care about you." He nodded. "Can I still call you Dad?" My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "If that's what you want." He smiled and hugged me. I didn't make promises I couldn't keep. I didn't tell him things he was too young to understand. I just stayed in his life in a way that didn't interfere with Samuel becoming his father. Karen and I never got back together. We eventually stopped arguing. There was nothing left to fight about. A year after I first caught her at that restaurant, I drove past it on my way home. I remembered sitting in that truck, thinking my entire life had just collapsed. Back then, I thought catching Karen was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing how long she had been making decisions for me without giving me the truth. I stopped at a red light and looked out toward the water. My life was different now. I had a smaller house, fewer possessions, and a lot less certainty about the future. But every decision belonged to me. Karen had wanted me to stay because she was afraid of losing her family. Samuel had finally stepped into the role he should have known about years earlier. And Caleb had 2 men in his life who had to figure out how to do the right thing for him. I couldn't change what Karen had done. I couldn't change the fact that I'd spent 4 years believing Caleb was my son. But I could decide what happened next. I stayed only long enough to make sure I understood the truth. Then I walked away from the marriage. And for the first time in years, I wasn't living someone else's version of my life. I was living mine. Thank you for watching.